Hi there and welcome to the Mojo Nation Play Creators Conference. Thank you for joining me for this panel session looking at diversity in the play space. I'm delighted to be joined by Alpesh Patel, VP of Global Toy Design at TOMY, Andrew McKay, Development Director at Flair, and Claire Broad, Head of Product Development at Moonbug Entertainment. Thank you guys for joining me for this session. I thought a good place to start would be looking at how each of you got into the design space, and from a diversity point of view, what did those courses look like? What, from an education point of view, did your start look like, bearing all this sort of stuff in mind? So Andrew, if we kick off with you, how did you enter the world of toy design? How did design pop up on your radar?
Well, my background is probably a slightly varied, I guess, journey into the toy space. So I actually started off as in engineering, so mechanical and production engineering. So it wasn't really in design. It was my background is from engineering. So I started back in the 80s, mid 80s, did a sort of like an old-fashioned apprenticeship, went to college and studied mechanical production engineering. And it's actually from there that I then sort of just by chance asked one of the lecturers about, about sort of any jobs that were going. And they just happened to say, oh, there's a job going at Milton Bradley. And at that time, I thought, Milton Bradley, I had no idea who they were and sort of applied. And then obviously, luckily I got the job and, started off working with Milton Bradley, obviously MB Games, as everybody probably knows it. And then obviously going into Hasbro. But when I started off at college, it was very much predominantly a male orientated course. There were no women on the course. All our lecturers were men. So it's very much a male dominated, I would say, white male dominated kind of course. There's a few sort of, I suppose black people on there and a few Asians, but predominantly it was sort of white, sort of male sort of course. And at that time, back in the 80s, I think it was very much, engineers are male, and that was it. There was very, very, talk about having females, in the workplace in that sort of engineering sort of viewpoint. So that was where my sort of start within the kind of the world of I guess, employment started, was in engineering, which was predominantly white and male.
Yeah. And Claire, in terms of your start in design, does that sort of tally up with your experience? How did you find yourself in design?
I also came a bit of a circular route because I started as a theatre designer, and on that course particularly, it was incredibly diverse. Because it was, I think it was St Martin's. It brought in people from all over the world, and there was quite a few mature students on as well. So I think that was quite a different way into it. So it was, I was lucky at that point that it was actually quite a diverse start.
Yeah, amazing. And did that tally when you then went into this particular sector with entertainment and stuff? Was there a bit of a shock between in the arts and that arts course, that was what it looked like, versus in employment? Was there a shift?
Yeah, I think a bit, because I think theatre is a very artsy art, whereas product design is more, you need an element of engineering, and you need a bit more of a, this isn't to downplay any theatre designers out there because I am one at heart, but you need a very practical mind, and so it is. Yeah, it's a tiny bit less diverse, I would say, than the courses that I did.
Okay, great. And Alpesh, in terms of when you started, how did your route crack on?
I actually discovered product design by a bit of an accident, actually, Billy. So I studied it for both GCSE and A level, and had a real passion for it. But when it came to actually choosing the course that I wanted to do at university, I was looking at, for some reason, I was choosing, and there's nothing, if there's any chartered surveyors watching this, for some reason, I was kind of on the path of chartered surveying, and I don't know why. It was my sister, and I've spoken to you about this before, Billy, who kind of said, "Ow, you're crazy to kind of go down that route. You're a born designer." So, having played with toys and then done the product design course in Lancashire, that led me on to doing a full-time role at a company in Halifax, which I was one of the design engineers on audio-visual furniture for like speakers and TVs and things like that. It was a great role, but I knew it wasn't me. So actually, Andy McKay was one of the first people I met in the toy industry. I saw a little ad for working at Hasbro, applied for it, was unlucky enough to get that role. And then Andy very kindly kind of reached out to me, and it started from there. I got the bug of wanting to work for a toy company and started off my career at Hasbro. I know we haven't reached onto the diversity questions, but just in terms of university, I would say it was very undiverse. We had probably 95% men. I believe we only had 3 women on the entire course when I was there back in the late 90s. In terms of ethnicity, I'm of Indian origin. I think I was the only one. I was the only non-white designer on the course back then as well. So things have massively changed, thank goodness, but very different even 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah. And now if we dive into that a little bit more, do you think that are there any reasons either from the course's point of view in terms of their outreach, or are there any reasons why you think it wasn't more diverse?
I can only speak from personal experience, Billy. So in terms of my ethnicity, I think, you know, I'm first generation kind of UK born, and you know, my parents and my grandparents emigrated from India and Africa respectively. And I think as they came into the country, they were starting, you know, their life from fresh, you know, whatever education, whatever skills they had to start from fresh. And I think parents of my generation probably to this point still think that academia is more important than anything else. So either become a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, you know, things that ultimately where you have a lifelong role and can have a really good career from it. So hopefully I'm answering your question here, Billy, but I think there was I think this is common throughout a lot of families. And as I said, I can only speak for my generation and my experience, but I think there's almost not a push, but there's an aspiration from parents to go into that type of criteria. So I think education, even from a younger age, of knowing that there's all these wonderful jobs, and especially in creativity, not just toy design, but anything creative, you know, you can really, you know, if I had that push when I was younger, I think I'd become an even more qualified and more knowledgeable designer today, if that push from my parents was in that. By the way, I'm not putting any blame towards my parents because they may watch this. They did a wonderful job in bringing me up, but I think that's what happened with me when I was younger. I think it's that, and it's common for quite a few people of my generation, probably of people today as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those insights, Al. That's really interesting. And then if we look at the toy space in general, and obviously we're at an interesting point at the moment where lots of toy companies have, you know, diversity officers, and they've got initiatives in place, and there's a real push around this sort of stuff. But Andrew, if we start with you in terms of in your role, in your team, in sort of the wider design space and your history in you know, working with design and working in toys, is there more this industry can be doing to encourage greater diversity when it comes to the design side of toys and games? And in terms of how it's evolved, you've been in the industry for a long time. Have you seen an evolution in terms of what teams, the makeup of teams, and what we're looking like?
I think teams have definitely evolved over the time that I've been in the toy industry. I think when I first started, which I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but it was sort of, I think, very much more of a, if you call it, a male-dominated sort of area. Whereas I think now you get a lot more diversity in terms of women, people of colour. So I think there's a lot more that's actually happening in these days. I think in toys, I think in the US companies are probably, or US-based companies are probably more of a lead in that area, whether that's through legislation or like you say, they have people that are really sort of looking at in that sort of thing. And I think if you're European or maybe UK-based companies, maybe are not as far advanced maybe as they could be or should be. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think in general, you know, as the way I look at it, if you're good enough, really, regardless of what color, race, creed, then you know you should be in that job. But you know, unfortunately, there is the other side where people may look at your ethnicity or you know your gender and sort of take that into consideration when you're applying for a job. But I think that's becoming less and less. But I think it's still probably more prevalent, I would say, in European-based companies rather than say the US, where they're a little bit more advanced in that area.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And then Claire, in terms of that, obviously you've previously been at Disney and other companies. You know, in your role when you've been working at design and product development in these roles, what has diversity looked like within these teams? But also, I think someone in your position, when you're seeing or looking for new talent and stuff like that, is there sometimes a sort of a disconnect between maybe what we're seeing at a university level in terms of diversity and then actually who's coming into these roles or who's applying for these roles?
Yeah, I think so. So when I was at Disney, we used to have a great intern program, which is still going on. And we used to get like 40 kids in each year and then do a kind of a bit like an X Factor day with them, get them all doing projects and presenting and such like. And we used to have a great mix of diversity of gender, of ethnicity. And that, so there's obviously people doing the product design courses, but then when we came to start advertising for the kind of the entry level product development associates roles, you obviously had to pick from whoever applied. And generally, we didn't get the same level of diversity applying for the roles as we did applying for the internships. So obviously, it's, you know, this was only over a few years and there was only, you know, a handful of jobs that we were advertising for. So it's not an extensive study, but there did seem to be some disconnect, that we were getting loads and loads of great applicants at internship, but then by the time we got to the actual workplace, it was a bit more white middle class. Yeah,
okay. And now, in terms of that, looking at sort of, I suppose, that your teams and how you approach recruitment and stuff like that, but also maybe to talk to that point as well, do you think there is a role for the industry to be closer to education, so that there isn't that sort of drop off maybe, or you know, whatever is happening in that gap between you know, a diverse course and then people applying for roles? Do you have any insights into maybe what, you know, either how that's happening or what toy companies might be able to do to bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're you know, depending on which country, and we're all part of some sort of toy association or a toy program that looks after the industry and our consumers and retailers. And I think we could all be doing more. You know, it's not down to one particular group or to one particular business, but I think the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion for me and our organization at TOMY here, because we've just undertaken that and are, you know, well within our journey, and we've got lots of big plans for the future, as well as now, is to really understand what diversity brings to the industry. For example, Andy mentioned about in the US, how they're probably a little bit ahead. And I think the reason why is because they have fantastic universities and schools that actually focus on toy design, and they're well known throughout the world. And because of that, that actually attracts diverse students from all around the world. So naturally, you know, these West Coast and East Coast toy companies, they've got a pool of talent, whether it's gender, or whether it's ethnicity, or whether it's able-bodied or disabilities. They've got a great pool of very talented people. So I think the more we can do specifically in the UK to promote the toy industry, to promote the values of the toy industry and the creativity of the toy industry, I think we'll get a wider range of eyeballs and a wider range of people interested. Just about Billy and again, I'm generalizing this, but I think as a toy industry, we don't do well enough to compete with all the other professions you can go out there. You know, this industry is probably, and I'm being biased here, as I'm sure Claire and Andy would be, but it's probably one of the best, if not the best, industry to be in. And we don't shout about that enough. We know internally, but we don't shout about it enough externally to get that, you know, diverse pool of candidates in.
Yeah, and I think my view on that as well, one interesting thing is that you see other industries, other creative industries, their sector has representation as part of big creative bodies where, you know, we've applied before in terms of, you know, if you're a video game firm or if you're a TV production company or a theatre company, there are huge diversity campaigns and initiatives and stuff in place that are helping those industries become even more diverse and celebrate their diversity. And toys sometimes isn't even seen as being an industry that qualifies to be as part of a creative industry's body or things like that. It's still seen as very much maybe industrial design or not a creative pursuit, and so those sorts of initiatives haven't trickled down. But and I think as well it's a responsibility on bodies like ours, like Mojo, in terms of, you know, telling the stories of diverse creators more, covering that space more, and also when we're doing our pitch and events like that, you know, making a real effort to actually, you know, be letting people of all backgrounds know that these opportunities are there, and if they've got ideas, they should.
Just sorry to add on that what Alpesh was saying there. I think also, you know, when I speak spoken to students in the past when we sort of got them to do projects, is see it as the toy industry to me is like the fashion industry. And if you compare, to me that's a really good comparison, and look what the fashion industry has done with diversity and how it's they promote themselves. And I think the toy industry should be doing something very similar in terms of trying to promote themselves and be a bit more fashionable, if that's the right word to use. I think some of the again, speaking to some lecturers at sort of colleges and universities, I don't think they see toys as a fashionable industry to be in. They want to furniture design or it's something else, but it's never toys are seen as a industry which is something that actually can bring value and actually has a great career in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm interested from an actual design point of view, and now you sort of touched upon it there. We've seen it in film and certain other sectors where they've had diverse creators in to tell diverse stories that have then resonated with a wide audience, and suddenly there's more films around certain demographics or targeting certain audiences that had previously been left behind or have been viewed as not as important to some of the big brand owners. Do you think there are opportunities in toys and play from a design point of view that if we get more diverse creators in, then the ideas they're going to have are going to be, there's going to be certain ideas that they would come up with that other people won't. And by actually putting those sort of toys out into the world, that then fuels, more kids seeing themselves in the toy box, then thinking about toy design, and it's sort of growing holistically that way. Andrew, do you think there's a role in that in terms of different backgrounds can bring different things to design?
I think that yes, I think there definitely could be. I think it's always that sort of commercial balance that has to be sort of weighed up between sort of how diverse can we be versus how commercially reality, in the big scheme of things, how commercial can that also be successful? And certain companies have pulled that off very well. Obviously, Patel are doing some great stuff with the types of products they're doing. Some of the other smaller companies are trying to be a bit more diverse and actually playing that up a lot more. But I think there is it's not an easy balancing act to take, and also you can go down a road of being really diverse, but then you say it's one of those kind of contentious areas. Well, why you're doing that product? Why aren't you doing this product? So I think it's a balancing act which companies have to sort of really think carefully about what they're putting out there and why they're doing it. Are they doing it for the right reasons?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Claire, on that, obviously now with your Moonbug and Disney, you're dealing with diverse characters and stories and stuff like that. In your role, looking after products and how these brands extend into different industries, is that something you've seen in terms of these more diverse stories are leading to creativity and an interesting product on shelves?
Yeah, it definitely does. It gives a different lens, but I think definitely you need to be doing it for the right reasons. I think the worst thing that companies can do is be tick box. Okay, I've got a green one, an orange one, a pink one, a black one, and that is, consumers are clever these days, and so the most important thing is about making sure that people are doing things for a genuine reason, that you're coming at it for the right reasons. But hopefully being diverse will become commercial the more it gets done, little steps at a time, because it then will become very uncommercial to not be diverse, because we live in a very diverse world and we need to be reflecting that in the products that we're making. But it is, I think the other thing that we've got is the buyer layer of complication in our industry, because we can make the most amazing products, and I'm sure we've all had them, amazing products that haven't actually made it to a shelf, and if you could put it in a kid's hand, they would absolutely love it, but it hasn't got past the buyer at whichever retailer it is. And I think that's then the challenge that we have as well, to try and educate the buyers of the world that on the products that we're making, the brands that we're working with, etc., that we can get them to buy in at the same level that we're buying in, and then hopefully little by little it will become more commercial, and we can actually get a properly that we won't be having this conversation in 5-10 years time, because it won't be necessary, because why wouldn't it be diverse?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Al, on that, obviously TOMY as a company is a global company. You look after design teams all around the world. Do you see that there are different design sensibilities that come with different cultures, and that's a big string to your bow in terms of being able to tap into that, and that therefore is another reason why it's important that we get more voices into the design sort of mix?
Yeah, absolutely, Billy. And I'll answer the question, but for me, what diversity really leads to is the ability for different people of different backgrounds, of different experiences to bring a different form of thinking to the same problem that we all face, which is what's the next product, what we're going to develop, and what problem we're trying to solve. And having that background of different thoughts and different ideas based on your own personal experiences outside of the skills that you've learned make a much more tangible and hopefully a much more fruitful product. So for us as a Japanese company, you know, our head offices are in Tokyo. We're very, very lucky to have a really diverse range of creatives all around the world working on common problems of how do we, you know, essentially how do we make the next hit toy, or how do we solve the problem of, you know, for example, of elderly people in Japan, especially where the average age is going up and up and up. How do we solve that through the creativity of the types of products that we do? So, yeah, I mean, for me, a company or an organization that isn't diverse, that don't have a diverse workforce, are going to remain static. So I encourage any companies that are thinking about diversity or investing into it, do it straight away. It just brings much more freshness and much more color into the task that you're trying to undertake.
Yeah, absolutely. And then before we wrap things up, I'm interested if there's anyone watching this that's either a designer from a diverse background that's in another industry thinking about getting involved in pitching product or moving over to the play space, or likewise, you know, a graduate or someone on a uni course that's looking at this and maybe, as we've said, doesn't know much about the toy space or hasn't had that sort of connection that we spoke about earlier. You know, what would you say to them about why they should be thinking about designing toys, games, play experiences? Could you sell the industry to them? And Andrew, if we kick off with you on this.
Oh, that's a big selling job to do. No, not really. I think what I would say to them is that, you know, toys are as it says, it's a fun industry. You know, I remember when you tell people what you do, the first thing they say is, "Oh, is it like Tom Hanks from Big?" That's always the first question that people say. And you know, it's a great, you know, sort of opening line to give to people. It's a great industry. It's fun. It's quick. You know, it's creative. You know, and anybody can do it in a design area. You know, you have to design toys. It's like I say to everybody, it's a bit like if you're designing a cup or a mug, somebody's got to still design it, make it, choose what color it's going to be. Toys are exactly the same thing. It just happens that it happens to be in a fun industry. You know, and it's a fast-moving goods. It's like fashion. It's fast. It's quick. We've got to come up with ideas. So again, that's the kind of way I would always describe to people. This is like a fashion-led industry, but for kids rather than for adults.
Yeah, absolutely. And Claire, what you're doing at Moonbug sounds amazing and incredibly fun. And yeah, I imagine there'll be lots of designers thinking, oh, it sounds like a dream job. So what, you know, what would you say to those people looking to maybe think about toys and games and play?
I think you just got to do it. Obviously, you know, there are boring bits about it, as every job has, but toys make people smile. That's the thing. You know, it's making kids happy, whether they're 2-year-olds or 22-year-olds. You know, it's about making fun and coming up with some great products. It's a great industry to actually be creative in, because you can make a fantastic, you know, yes, you could be a aeroplane designer one day, and then you can design a slide the next day, and then a teddy bear. So, you know, you don't have to specialize. You specialize in toys, and a toy can be anything. So it's, you know, it's great. Yeah. Come and join us.
Amazing. There we go. And Al, anything you'd add in terms of if anyone's sort of on the fence or thinking about, they're from a diverse background, thinking about, you know, toys and games being a new thing for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So Andy and Claire gave some great answers there, and 100% true, everyone. I'll give two ways, from a creative point of view and from a business point of view. So from a business point of view, long-term job security, because there's literally tens of thousands of babies born every single day. So you can keep making those products for the new babies. And that's borrowed from my boss, Pete Hensley, who tells me that and keeps me on track for that. The other thing I would say as well is mentioning in terms of what Andy and Claire have said is, if you haven't, just watch a kid open a toy either at you know, on a holiday season or on their birthday, and just watch their excitement. That will give you everything you need from a rationale and a reason as to why to join this whole industry. It's the most fantastic thing. And as someone who's got kids and a family of, within the family, some young children, you feel like it's a personal touch towards ensuring children's happiness is gained, constantly through play and development of products. So brilliant industry. Don't even think about it. Just apply for a role as quickly as you can.
There we go. You've been told. Well, amazing. Thank you guys so much for your insights on this session and talking about this area. And I know, a white guy chairing a panel on diversity isn't always a good look. And I know, Al, we were speaking about you sharing, but I'm glad you didn't, because your insights, as Andy's and Claire's, have been amazing. So thank you so much for taking the time out on this. And I think it's an important subject that, us at Mojo will hopefully, shine a light on more. And yeah, so thank you for taking time out. Thank all you guys for watching, and we'll hopefully all catch up again very soon.